News.
While many other countries scramble to get hold of enough COVID-19 vaccine doses, government data suggests millions of people in the U.S. remain unvaccinated, even though federal health officials have said there's enough supply to get the shot if someone who's eligible wants it. And that's fueling the urgency surrounding the newest wave of coronavirus infections in the United States, which is intensifying. Florida is among the hardest hit states. Broward County Mayor Steve Geller tells ABC News that cases per 100,000 residents are spiking exponentially.
June 15th, we were at 6. July 1, we were 14. July 15th, we were 37. July 30, we were 85. And Monday, we were at 94. And remember, anything over 10 is considered out of control.
He says younger people are being hospitalized at a higher rate than any other time during the pandemic. Debate on a roughly $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure package has slowed in the Senate as lawmakers argue over proposed amendments to the bill. NPR's Windsor Johnson reports Senate Democrats are pushing for a vote by the end of the week, but the timing is still up in the air.
Senate leaders have been at odds over the pace of debate, but Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says the process is moving in the right direction.
The Senate's making great progress on amendments, and we're going to make further progress very soon. While a specific number of additional amendments has yet to be agreed to, I believe we can consider another substantial tranche on the floor today.
Senate Republicans, including Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, have warned against rushing the amendment process. The infrastructure package includes more than $550 billion in new spending to upgrade the nation's roads, bridges, and railways. Lawmakers on both sides have said they won't break for the August recess until the job is done. Windsor Johnston, NPR News, Washington.
This is NPR. A Florida court says preservation of evidence is critical to understanding why the Champlain Tower South condo building in Surfside partially collapsed in June, killing 98 people. Miami-Dade Circuit Judge Michael Hansman presided over a virtually held meeting today involving lawsuits filed by victims' relatives, condo owners, and mortgage holders, among others, who are now seeking damages for losses. Later this month, Miami-Dade County is expected to shift control of the condo site to a court-appointed receiver who says talks are ongoing into how engineers and other experts will have access to the property. At the Summer Olympics in Japan, Canadian sprinter Andre DeGrasse finally has won an elusive gold medal. DeGrasse beat a talented field Wednesday night in Tokyo to win the men's 200 meters. From Tokyo, NPR's Tom Goldman has more.
Andre DeGrasse is known for a famous moment at the 2016 Olympics. At the end of a 200 meters semifinal, he pulled up alongside the great Jamaican sprinter Usain Bolt as they crossed the finish line, and they flashed broad smiles at each other. DeGrasse has smiled his way through the sprints in Tokyo, especially Wednesday night. As he often does, he powered from behind to win the 200 meters and succeed Bolt, who won the event at the last three Olympics. Americans Kenny Bednarek and Noah Lyles won silver and bronze. 17-year-old U.S. phenom Arian Knighton was fourth. For DeGrasse, it was his first gold and fifth Olympic medal over the last two games. Tom Goldman, NPR News, Tokyo.
You're listening to NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Joyce Foundation, committed to advancing racial equity and economic mobility for the next generation in the Great Lakes region. Learn more at joycefdn.org. And the Annie E. Casey Foundation.
Good afternoon. You're listening to classical music here on West Virginia Public Broadcasting. I'm your host for this afternoon, Matt Jackford, and I'm here with some special guests as part of our call for performers. Today we have the West Virginia Brass Quintet, which includes Dave Porter on trumpet, Joel Cotter on trumpet, Andrew Scott on horn, Brian Politnik on trombone, and John Schooley on tuba. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you for having us. Good.
Really glad to have you on the show, and they're going to go ahead and start off with some music, so go ahead and fire away. All right. We have the West Virginia Brass Quintet in here live, and they just performed the Canzone Bergamasca. And we're going to be talking with Brian Politnik, who's the trombone player. And full disclosure, was my euphonium drill sergeant, teacher once upon a time.
One of you drill sergeants.
I'm sure Dr. Jackson's out there somewhere listening, laughing right now. So Brian, first introduce yourself and then tell us where everybody's coming in from.
Wow. So my name is Brian Plitnick, and I am professor of music at Potomac State College over in Kaiser, West Virginia. And I'm going to therefore call myself an honorary West Virginian, even though technically I live right over the river in Maryland. But
Okay.
I'm a West Virginian at heart.
All right.
Everyone else actually is from West Virginia in the West Virginia Brass Quintet. We have Dave Porter right here in Charleston. We have Andrew Scott, who is in Buchanan, coming from Buchanan, West Virginia. We have John Schooley from Fairmont, and we have Joel Cotter from Morgantown. So yeah, we're delighted to be here.
Yeah, it's great. You all are coming from all over the state, or just slightly across the border. That's okay.
And hold it against me.
Yeah, I won't. I promise. But it's cool because you really are truly a West Virginia Brass Quintet. You're not just coming from one specific area. You're coming really from all over the state. And so, how did you all form up? How did this all come together?
Well, some of the original founding members of the group came from another quintet, and this group was formed in 2009, and we just kind of built it from there, and we perform all over the state. Like you said, we're from all over the state, but we perform all over the state, and also in Maryland and Pennsylvania and anywhere else that'll have us.
The border states.
We love to travel and perform, and that's kind of a passion, and I guess it kind of has to be when there's more than 150 miles between the closest members. So
right, yeah,
it kind of has to be a work of passion.
Wouldn't be fair if y'all just did everything in Morgantown or Charleston.
Right. Yeah.
So what kind of gigs do you all do? What sorts of things, like weddings or or what events? Or...
if you pay us, we'll do it, basically. So no, but we love to perform. We do a lot of weddings. We do commencement ceremonies. We do church services. We do concerts. We do. I know I'm forgetting lots of things, but just any type of things. We've probably done Christmas programs, and we have an annual residency at the Greenbrier Resort for Christmas. And man, there's so many different types of things we get to do, and that's part of what makes it great. It's just the diversity of types of music that we get to play. I mean, everything from classical to ragtime to you name it.
Yeah, all sorts of stuff. That's awesome. So, if someone wanted to hire said West Virginia Brass Quintet, how could they go about doing that?
Well, it's funny you say that. I just happened to have a website for us to plug, the WestVirginiaBrassQuintet.com. So West Virginia as in WV, WV brassquintet.com.
That's right.
And you can find all kinds of contact information and more about the group and our upcoming performances, all that sort of thing, at wvbrassquintet.com. So,
okay, great. Yeah, all right, just in case.
Just in case. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about that last piece that we just played. That was the Canzone Bergamasca by Samuel Scheidt. Scheidt was technically an early Baroque composer, but he was composing in kind of the late Renaissance style, what we just played. And a lot of, even though he was a German, a lot of Germans at that time were modeling what they were doing after the Italians. And the Italians were known for, at least in certain areas, particularly Venice, in the Renaissance, of writing music for brass. Unfortunately, the piece we just played wasn't actually originally written for brass, so it's a bit of a stretch to make that connection. But as a brass quintet, to talk about this type of ensemble, we have to steal a lot of music. Steal, borrow, arrange, essentially, because there isn't a lot of music written for brass quintet until the 20th century, and then a lot. And part of the reason for that is that this ensemble, 2 trumpets, 1 horn, trombone, tuba, didn't really exist, as a standard type of instrumentation until about 1954. The New York Brass Quintet was formed in 1954. They originally started as just a thing to kind of introduce brass instruments to children in schools, kind of a demonstration. That's how they kind of formed, and they said, hey, this is really fun. We're going to, let's do some more of this. Oh, well, there's no music? Well, let's just arrange some things. We'll borrow, we'll steal, and that's still kind of the tradition. They kind of kicked it off then and became a touring group, but I think it really became solidified in 1970 or so with the Canadian Brass, and that's where they kind of got to that next level of recognition, touring group, worldwide renown, and that's when this type of ensemble became a standard instrumentation, standard fixture. So, as far as new pieces that are written, you're going to see it after in the later part of the 20th century.
Right.
So the piece that we started with was borrowed. The next piece we're going to play is actually written for brass quintet. It's written for this instrumentation, written by, this might surprise you, but written by Ian MacDonald. The name of the piece is Sea Sketches. It's surprising because he was a guitarist and for a lot of his career, a rock guitarist.
Okay.
Not the kind of person you would expect necessarily to be writing brass quintet music, but this one he wrote. He's originally from Scotland, born in 1950. He was a singer and guitarist. He became a music teacher in 1973 at the Hermitage Academy. And it was there in 1980 that he started writing brass music. I guess he maybe had some colleagues and became more familiar with these instruments and learned how to write for them. And this piece, the Sea Sketches, his second brass quintet, has become just a standard of the repertoire because it's just so well written. It's as if he instantly grasped exactly how to write for this instrument.
That's incredible, especially coming from a rock musician. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not putting anything down. But
No,
you don't really write out music in rock bands. You're really just sort of communicating it orally or orally.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the joke about how do you get a guitarist to and there's a guitarist sitting in the studio, so this is really horrible to say. But how do you get a guitarist to stop playing? You put music in front of him. That's but not Ian MacDonald. Ian MacDonald knocked it out of the park with this one. So this is a 3-movement piece of Sea Sketches. We have the Maritime Overture to start. We have the Sunset Shanty for the second movement, and then the Hornpipe for the third movement.
Okay, great. And performing, we have the West Virginia Brass Quintet live in our studios. All right, we have the West Virginia Brass Quintet performing live in our studios. That was the Sea Sketches by Ian McDonald, and that's a fun piece. Definitely works really well for the brass band, you know, coming from that rock band mentality, putting it into the brass quintet there. That's a great piece. And, you know, this is an interesting ensemble, the brass quintet. I mean, it's just a chamber ensemble, so, you know, how do you all work without a conductor? Who does sort of the starts and stops, the tempos, things like that? How does that work out?
Oh man, we should have thought of that.
Yeah,
that would help a lot.
Yeah.
No. It's actually, honestly, most of the time our cues will come from first trumpet, but we all take turns cueing things depending on who's playing what and when and how the music is written and what parts are moving and all that sort of thing. So we all have to take that responsibility.
Right, because you started out on the movement of that piece.
Yeah,
so,
right.
You know.
And so it's always different, and you know, that's part of the challenge is writing down, oh, who's cueing that, or where's this tempo coming from, or what, you know, what are we doing here? Who's setting the tempo? What's going on? So
right.
Yeah, it's that's part of the challenge, but part of the fun of it.
Right, that's a good point. So everybody sort of has to interact with each other. Everybody's watching each other.
Absolutely.
And you know, hopefully
yes.
that's the goal, right? That's the goal.
When all goes well, yes.
Yeah. All right, and then so we have some classical music that's been arranged for brass band here coming up, and including music by Claude Debussy. Of course, you know him as an orchestral composer, maybe, you know, piano or strings composer. Tell us about this next selection.
Yeah, so the next selection, again, as I was mentioning before, you know, this instrumentation, the brass quintet, really not a lot of composers wrote for. There are a few interesting examples, early music, but you know, it's been said that there is no classical era brass quintet music, you know, actual music written for this instrumentation. There's also no very, very little romantic era music written for this instrumentation. So we borrow and arrange and all that sort of thing.
Right, that sounds like the you know, sort of thing that the wind ensembles did, you know, when they first got started doing arrangements of orchestral music at the time until people started actually writing for them, like Gustav
Exactly.
Holst.
Yeah. Same story. So we do what we have to, and why should great music not be played in this instrumentation? So this next piece, the Gollywog's Cakewalk by Debussy, it was written for piano. It's part of his suite. This is the 6th and final piece in the suite that he called the Children's Corner, and he wrote that in 1908. And there's a lot of interesting things you could talk about with this piece. I mean, some of the the names, the Gollywog, the Cakewalk. I mean, all these are interesting things. But I think that what I'd like to focus on is it really has to do with a rivalry. And it has to do with a rivalry between the Germans and the French. And I don't know, maybe your listeners, already know this story. So if you know this one, I apologize. But there's a really fascinating part of this music that I want you listeners to try to hear. And there's a fascinating part with the rivalry between the French composers and the German composers. German composers, late Romantic era, are coming off of great minds, Brahms and Wagner,
like Wagner,
and these this type of writing. And the Germans were convinced, the very, very proud nation, and they were convinced that German music would be, the future for the next 100 years. They even made statements like this. You can read, there's articles, people saying like, oh yeah, the next 100, the supremacy of German music, which is scary when you talk about Germans, but you get this, the supremacy of German music for the next 100 years. And right on the tails of that, you have French composers saying, I don't think so. Like, who are you guys? You don't own music. Like, we're writing a completely different style. And it was pretty hard to compete with Wagner in terms of like just the powerful music he was writing. These 4-hour-long operas and the just huge, massive orchestral music. And Debussy comes along and starts writing music in the Impressionist style, where the whole concept was not to be heavy and powerful and that kind of Teutonic just power and demanding music, and it's very light and ethereal and atmospheric music, and he knew very well that this was flying in the face of all the kind of what the Germans had thought should be the standard. So as a Frenchman, he did something in this particular piece, and maybe your listeners have heard this story, maybe not, but he actually quotes Wagner. He quotes the opera, the opening of Tristan and Isolde. He quotes it in there. And then immediately following that quote, he does kind of a little orchestral laughter, a little
and, mocking the Germans,
just to poke fun at Wagner. I mean, and that would have been at this time in 1908. That would have been an opera that everyone would have been familiar with. I mean, it would have been almost popular music, this Tristan and Isolde. So hearing that quote, it would have been very obvious that he lifted that. And also very obvious that he was poking fun at it. So if you listen for that section about halfway through, there's kind of that interesting moment where this theme comes back. It's kind of a slower thing, followed by these 3 little punctuated, and it happens a couple times. So something to listen for.
That's hilarious. That's the French, sort of mocking the Germans
exactly,
at the time.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. The little rivalry coming out here with the 2 different forms of music. So let's take a listen to Gollywog's Cakewalk by Claude Debussy, and this is performed here live by the West Virginia Brass Quintet. That's some funny music there. And I heard the quote in there, and like it took me a second, then I realized. Can one of y'all play it? I heard it in the trumpet. Can you just play it real quick? I would love to just so our audience knows. Yeah, that's it. And then you hear this sort of, right afterwards. That's there it is. There it is. And I never really noticed that before that was a quote of Tristan. I can hear that because that's the love, death theme or whatever.
Yeah, and it's right at the beginning of the prelude to that opera. So it's probably one of the best known parts of it, actually.
Right, and that's really funny. Cool stuff there. Gollywog's Cakewalk by Claude Debussy from his Children's Corner Suite. And then you all have another piece by Debussy here, another arrangement of Debussy's. And this is another piece from originally for piano.
Yeah, originally for piano. This one written sometime between late 1909 and early 1910. It's the 8th piece in his book of preludes. And this is The Girl with the Flaxen Hair. Again, it's written for piano. It's worth noting, however, just to talk about, these words, kind of throwing around this word like flaxen, and we all just assume, okay, it's some color of hair, but it's not. I actually had to look it up. I thought, well, wait a minute, I actually have no idea what color that is. So flaxen, I should quiz you, Matt, but maybe, it's a type of.
let me get Google out. Let me get Google out.
It's a type of very light, almost colorless kind of blonde. And I've heard it described as hay color. And you think, why on earth would somebody, use that term to describe, it's not even found in the English language as a description of hair until Charles Dickens used it in 1849. And he uses this in his book, David Copperfield. And he uses the flaxen hair, but he's talking about this hay color, but there's more to it. It actually refers to it has indications or implications of innocence. So a girl with flaxen hair is an innocent youth, is that kind of thing, and so that's the reason probably that he didn't write the girl with auburn hair or whatever. He used this kind of interesting word. He based, I don't know if you knew this, but Debussy based this on a poem, also called "The Girl with the Flaxen Hair." It's originally in French. I could read the poem for you. It's short, but it really kind of sets the mood. Although if I take too long to read it, then our trumpet players will they'll need to warm up again. But but I'll make it quick. Just because it really I didn't know there was a poem that this was based on. Everybody has heard this piece on piano, but the poem goes something like this. This is Le Conte de l'Isla, his original poem. On the lucerne mist flowers in bloom, who sings praises to morning? It is the girl with golden hair, the beauty with lips of cherry. For love, in clear summer sunlight, has soared with the lark and sung now. Now, it goes on from there, and kind of, but just to get a taste of kind of this very flowery love song, and
right.
But also this indication of innocence, and that's really what Debussy was writing about with the flaxen hair.
Right, yeah, and I always thought this first chord, they have this minor seventh chord that sort of goes back and forth. I think it's in the trumpet in this arrangement, and I always thought that as, Debussy, in awe of the girl with the flaxen hair, sort of mesmerized by them. That's why it sort of goes up and down, and, and then you finally bring in the rest of the ensemble there. And, okay, well, let's hear that piece here. This is the Girl with the Flaxen Hair, arrangement of a piece by Debussy, of course, and performed here by the West Virginia Brass Quintet. Short and sweet there. That was The Girl with the Flaxen Hair by Claude Debussy, an arrangement for brass band, performed here live in our studios by the West Virginia Brass Quintet. And that piece works surprisingly well for a brass band, you know, of course, originally for piano there, but works really nice with those sustained, you know, horns and the sort of darker tone of the brass quintet. That's really nice. And so that's music by Claude Debussy there, and we're here live in our studios, and we've got a live stream going in case you want to watch the Brass Quintet live on Facebook or on YouTube. We have Catherine, who's saying she's a transplanted West Virginian listening from San Diego. She said fantastic.
Wow.
And and then we got YouTube going as well. Eddie Eisenbach here is working the cameras for us, like Steven Spielberg.
Nice.
And so we've got the whole production going to get you this music and video streamed to you live. And so, Brian, what do we got next?
Yeah, well, I just quick about the Debussy. I mean, you can really hear the contrast between what we're talking about with the German style of you know, music that was being written at this time, and then the French style, and just how atmospheric and how
colorful, atmospheric. Yeah.
There's a great story about Debussy. One time, his composition teacher asked him, you know, what kind of harmony are you writing? Like, what form is this? What's going on? And he replied, "Ma plaisir," which just means my pleasure. Like whatever I feel like writing.
Comes, yeah, whatever.
So I like that answer. I could probably pass theory if I would have taken that approach. You know, but,
it's just jazz, baby. That's what they.
Just, whatever.
Yeah, that's a
you
great
have to
point.
be Debussy to pull that off, I think. But yeah.
Right. Yeah, I just got to do what I want, and here it comes.
So the next piece we're going to play is from the 1939 classic Wizard of Oz, and this is Somewhere Over the Rainbow. But what you may not know about this piece is that in 1939 at the Academy Awards, this song actually won Best Original Song, composed by Harold Arlen, lyrics by Yip Harburg. And what I didn't know in kind of researching this, of course, probably a lot of people know that you know, Judy Garland, of course, the one who sang this, they were considering Shirley Temple for the role of Dorothy.
Interesting. Okay.
Who was a big child star of the 1930s and 40s, and they almost cast her. Now Judy Garland was cast. She was the original cast member, but they had talked about this. Like MGM Pictures had talked about casting Shirley Temple since about like 1935, and they were kind of like hyping this to see how people would react to it, and everybody's really excited about it. And Shirley Temple was a huge Wizard of Oz fan, and basically this song was one of the deciding factors for the reason that they didn't cast her, because Judy Garland was a better singer.
Okay, gotcha.
And then this piece that almost got cut from the film is what I've read about this. The studio executives, they thought, you know, would a girl from Kansas really be singing about these rainbows and things? You know, this is just this before she goes to Oz, you know, and so would she really be? This is kind of, I don't know, you know. And so they almost cut it. And one of the studio executives who knew what a great song this was, he knew that this was going to be a hit. He said, "Look, either it stays or I go."
Wow.
About this piece, he said, "Yeah, it stays or I go."
Wow, the ultimatum there.
Yeah, he laid it down, and they kept it, and it won an Academy Award for Best Original Song. So,
wow, usually the composer doesn't win that.
Yeah.
So. I'm very impressed by that.
Yeah. So this is, of course, arranged for brass by Roger Fletcher. This is our rendition of Over the Rainbow.
Okay, here performed live by the West Virginia Brass Quintet. Beautiful arrangement of Over the Rainbow. That was an arrangement by Roger Fletcher. And that's a great piece for a brass band right there. And it's interesting you're talking about how difficult that piece was maybe for Shirley Temple or whoever else was auditioning, and that you hear that octave leap at the beginning. It's just really tough because you got to kind of pick it out of thin air. You got to start with that giant leap, and then you sort of come down. Sort of like a overarching rainbow. And that's a performance here live in our studios by the West Virginia Brass Quintet. And so I'm wondering, if you all have any gigs coming up that you'd like to plug. You've got some stuff on the calendar, I think, right?
Yeah, actually, this coming Sunday, we're going to be performing at the Tamarack Center outside of Beckley, in Beckley.
Yeah.
And
near Beckley.
The inside, outside, we'll be outside.
Okay.
But at the Tamarack Center, we're playing from 12 to 3 in the afternoon this coming Sunday.
Cool.
And it's a concert setting. We're just going to be kind of playing, but people will come and go, and while they're enjoying the amazing artwork and artisan crafts and things at the Tamarack. So yeah, if you're in the area, come on out and stop by and have a listen.
Yeah, absolutely. So that'll be at the Tamarack. What'd you say, this weekend?
This coming Sunday.
Coming Sunday, 12 to 3.
Sunday.
Go on out and take a listen to the brass band, West Virginia Brass Quintet, I should say. And, it's good that you all are getting back into it. I imagine you all had a pretty big hiatus because of COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we've all, I think, in the performing arts world, we've all kind of suffered.
Right.
As far as, being able to perform. Look, I mean, why performers perform is because they love it. And it's not for the money, in many cases, it's obviously not for the money. But even if, even if you make it big, I mean, it's not the money necessarily. It's because you love to perform. And when you can't do that, it's tough. So, on the other hand, some people kind of took the break and worked on things, got better, got stronger. Some people needed a break. And so I think it all kind of has worked out, but it's nice to be getting back to things. Hopefully things kind of stay where we can continue to perform.
Right. As long as everybody
love,
keeps getting vaccinated, and we can have our our concerts again, indoor, outdoor, and whatever. Because I know brass ensembles weren't really allowed because strings were okay because they could wear masks and stuff, but brass are projecting air through it.
So unfair.
Yeah, right? That's not even fair. Yeah, come on, guys.
And actually, we tried a few things. We had a couple performances during the pandemic, really. We still did our residency at the Greenbrier Resort over Christmas, and we tried they sell these bell covers and masks that are designed to allow the mouthpiece to slide through the mask and all sorts of. Man, it's really difficult to play with that stuff. And
it's like having a mute on the whole time or
it's
something.
It's just so bizarre. And honestly, it didn't work. We had to go. Our fallback position was to go back to social distancing. So all of a sudden we're performing, which is tough too. I mean, and I know Dave, who plays with the West Virginia Symphony. I mean, he could tell you about stories of his second trumpet right next to him is how many feet? 10, 15 feet away?
Oh man,
literally 15 feet away. Ordinarily in a normal performing setting, they're right next to each other. They can hear each other. They can act. They can communicate.
Right, and the timing's
all of a sudden
right there.
It's like, well, yeah, you're performing, but it's not quite. It's not quite the same. So.
Like eventually you have to use a walkie-talkie or something to perform.
Yeah.
At that point, wow. Okay, well, it's great to have you all back in the swing of things. It's great to have music just live and stuff, and that's why I decided to do this call for performance, was to get people, have them still have gigs while this pandemic was going on, so we could have a safe way to broadcast and transmit gigs without
such a great thing that you've done, and of course your programming here is always excellent. So we're delighted to be a part of it.
Well, we're glad to have you all on, and glad everything's getting back to our normalcy here. So one more piece from The Wizard of Oz, if you want to take that away.
We're going to wrap it up. I mean, because we are brass players, the next piece is probably particularly fitting.
Yeah.
Me
too.
Also from The Wizard of Oz, If I Only Had a Brain. However, this is a maybe not the standard arrangement that you might expect. This is in a samba style.
Okay.
And arranged by Gary Schlechter. And based on a jazz trombonist, Carl Fontana, a very well-known jazz trombonist, who basically had this arrangement that he played with a jazz group in Stuttgart in 2001. He ended up playing such an interesting solo over top of these changes that he decided, that Gary Schlechter decided, hey, I'm going to take this solo and then work a piece around the solo.
Oh, cool.
So it's one of those kinds of arrangements, and it really works well as a samba. So here we go.
All right.
And by the way, this if you hear a slightly different sound, we have our first trumpet, in this case, Joel, is playing first on this, and he's playing the flugelhorn. So
cool.
It gives it kind of a different sound and kind of a more mellow vibe.
A little darker sound. Cool. This is If I Only Had a Brain, a question I wonder all the time, performed by the West Virginia Brass Quintet. Yeah, that was awesome. Love that. Little jazzy arrangement there of If I Only Had a Brain in the samba style. And we heard a performance with the West Virginia Brass Quintet performing live in our studios. And I think that about does it for y'all's repertoire for today. So I just want to thank you all for coming on. We had Dave Porter on trumpet, Joel Cotter on trumpet, Andrew Scott on horn, Brian Plitnick on trombone, and John Schooley on tuba. Thank you guys so much for coming on. And
thank you, man.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed
it was great having you on. So feel free to reach out again. I hope we can have you on again.
Hope so.
And check them out. Again, they'll be performing live at the Tamarack, outside of the Tamarack on Sunday, this Sunday, 12 to 3. So
and wvbrassquintet.com. More information there.
Yeah, wvbrassquintet.com. Check them out. There's more information. And if you want to hire the Brass Quintet, you can do that on the website. So check them out. Stay tuned for 1A. That about does it for classical music. So stay tuned to WVPB Charleston, WVBY Beckley, WVBL Bluefield, WVPW Buchanan, WVWV Huntington, WVP Martinsburg, WVKM Matewan, WVPM Morgantown, WVPG Parkersburg, WVDS Petersburg, WVWS Webster Springs, WVMP Wheeling,